Hi there, great to see you. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcome you up here to Weir Yard, and today we're going to be taking a good close look at an exclusively commissioned locomotive. It's come not from a retailer but actually from a magazine, Model Rail magazine, and they have a good long history of commissioning some really quite interesting models for the ready-to-run market. These have included departmental wagons as well as some exclusive locomotives too. And quite often their mantra has been to do departmental stock, or indeed things that they felt that the mainstream manufacturers were perhaps overlooking. And actually a lot of these models have gone on to be incredibly popular, and I've bought quite a few of them over the years. Now, Model Rail magazine have very kindly sent over an example of their PWM, or permanent way machines, which is a small diesel shunter that some people might not be aware was one of the most long-lived on British railways, alongside the Class 08 shunter, with the first being ordered in 1951 and two of them actually lasting long enough to be in the ownership of EWS. Indeed, one of them was the locomotive that had the distinction of being the first locomotive that EWS sold for preservation, and three members of the 5-strong class have actually survived into preservation to this day. Now, Model Rail magazine commissioned this from Heljan, and whilst they're not able to replicate the very first locomotive that was ordered in 1951 because of some of its unique detail differences, they have offered the next 4 locomotives in all the different liveries that they carried throughout their lifetime. It's potentially the perfect choice for an awful lot of layouts, being that with its delivery in the early 1950s and it lasting all the way into the 1990s and actually on beyond that with preservation, these are suitable for so many layouts, and they're the perfect accompaniment to all those departmental wagons that Model Rail have commissioned over the years. Now, I'm particularly interested to see how well this model is put together. I have read things online about the fit of the body to the chassis, and I really want to see for myself with my own eyes just how this model is. So thanks to Model Rail sending one over to the channel, we're going to take a good close look. And I am going to be doing a full DCC fit on this, so if you're thinking, well, they'll have sent you a perfect model, well, we're going to be taking it apart and putting it back together so we can do a DCC fit. So I'm going to see just how well it really does all go together. So if you're really interested in one of these unusual beasts, then come with me and I'll give you the full lowdown on what I find with this model. It's the unsung hero of the departmental world, but can it be the hero of your model railway? Well, come with me and let's take a good close look. And as we go through the video, don't forget that we've got a link down below. It's not an affiliate link, but it does take you to Model Rail offers, where you can pick up not just all the different livery versions of the permanent way machines, but also any of the other exclusive models that Model Rail magazine has commissioned. And they've actually got a sale on at the moment with some of the other models, so it's well worth just having a browse and seeing what they've got available. If you do like the video as you go through, do give that like button a tickle and consider subscribing if you've not already done so. But how good is this model? Come with me and we'll take a good close look. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. We're proud to be supported by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for new and used. Pre-order all forthcoming models with confidence, or check out the extensive listings of second-hand. Each model is checked by experts in the field to make sure you're getting the very best. With new models uploaded daily, there's always something new to find. You can also specify from their value weathering and renumbering service right through to bespoke graffiti to get exactly the model that you want. Get something special today by browsing at themodelcentre.com. Over the years, Model Rail magazine has commissioned quite a lot of ready-to-run items of rolling stock and then latterly locomotives too, which have provided a great deal of variety to the modeller. These are ostensibly available at a discount to subscribers or at full price to non-subscribers, and it's been a great way over the years to pick up some slightly unusual wagons and locomotives that might not have otherwise made the main ranges of manufacturers' portfolios. Initially, they would offer engineers' wagons in liveries on existing tooling that manufacturers were already offering, and this van fit is one of them, and was the first time that the vacuum-fitted vans had been offered in engineers' olive green from Bachmann. And in many respects, I like to think that these proved the market was there for such things, and we've subsequently seen quite a few other engineers' olive green wagons appear in the main range. They've also commissioned their own locomotives, very ambitious projects, and some really interesting models have come through because of this, such as the J70 that was commissioned from Rapido Trains, really quirky, almost a garden shed on wheels, and very reminiscent to a lot of people, I guess, because the prototype was what Toby from Thomas the Tank Engine was based on. They've also commissioned other items such as the USA dock tanks and a whole host besides, and these have really proved to be quite an interesting and eclectic mix of models, and which I've picked up quite a few over the years. But today I'm very grateful to have been sent from Model Rail the Ruston PWM, or permanent weigh machine, that they commissioned from Heljan, and again another unusual prototype which we probably would never have seen ready to run if it wasn't for Model Rail. We've got a catalogue number MR-404, and this is the Ruston 165DE permanent weigh machine in BR Blue. Now, Model Rail are offering the models in a variety of different liveries to suit all periods that these locomotives ran in, from the original British Railways green through a slightly more olive departmental green, then on into the rail blue, which you see this example in, and then finally a departmental yellow for the 1980s and onwards. It's a pretty standard, very solid box. Just getting it out, we've got some paperwork on top here, and just looking in here, we've got a potted history of the class, with the prototype number 650 being ordered in November 1951, being delivered to the Western region at Swindon Works in 1953, basically a standard industrial 165DE, but with a few modifications including a dead man's brake pedal, radiator shutters, lamp brackets, cab heater, and the ability, most importantly, to disconnect its traction motor when it was being towed between depots and work sites. Now, this was something that afflicted particularly things like the Class 08 shunter. If they moved too quickly, it was possible to overspeed the traction motors, and because of the gearing, they would spin faster and faster until the point where the centripetal acceleration would literally cause the motors to explode and seize up the axle. So to stop that, the traction motors on these were specified to be able to unmesh so that the locomotives could be towed dead in train to work sites. The idea was that these would then be used to move around wagons when they were doing track replacements, and this initial purchase by the Western region proved to be really quite useful. And in the late 1950s, when BR were replacing the traditional 60-foot lengths of rail with continuous welded rail and started to put together pre-assembly depots around the Western region, the success of that initial locomotive led the Western region to order 4 more, although these had a few extra modifications which included a slope-fronted cab, bigger windows, and it's these 4 which Heljan have tooled up for. The original number 650 is not able to be replicated from the tooling, I believe. Interestingly enough, 2 of these actually lasted long enough to be bought effectively by EWS, although they were quickly sold on, and they have the distinction as being one of the first locomotives to be sold by EWS into preservation. Considering there was only 5 of these, they've had a good survival rate, with 3 being preserved and a 4th one lasting as late as 2011, albeit as a spares donor. Now, the information in here on DCC Fitting does feel like there's a page missing, I will say that now, but rest assured I will show you the full DCC Fitting later on in the video. The model has a Next 18 decoder socket, and we at least do get this addendum which hopefully should guide us through the DCC Fitting process. Getting it out of the box, just the clamshell within the foam. I'm going to slide that out, and you can see there the magnetic wand contained underneath. This is to turn on and off the working cab lights. This really only applies to DC modelers so that they can still enjoy the functioning of the cab light. We've also got some extra detailing parts here, including those aforementioned radiator blinds, and we've also got some black cutouts, which I think may be blanks to do with the cutouts on the buffer beams, although these being in black wouldn't match with the yellow buffer beams. And then we've also got some dummy front and back couplings, although I will say you can't actually apply these without removing the factory tension locks. It's kind of an either or basis. Getting it out of the box is very apparent. There's a lot of weight in this, and I can feel first off the bat the entire running plate is a die cast piece, and it does feel really nice and substantial. You can tell under your fingertips what is metal and what is plastic to some extent, and that really does feel a weighty beast. I'm going to just compare it to the USA dock tank, as I've got that to hand, and it's difficult really, just with this very unscientific process, to see which is heavier, but to my feel they feel around the same weight, even though the USA dock tank is a much bigger locomotive. Looking underneath, you can see that we've got slimline tension locks factory fitted into a NEM pocket, and all of that is contained within an industry standard triangular tail. These can be removed. You can add couplings of your choice or remove them altogether, although as I alluded to before, you do end up with this rather large opening in the buffer beams if you go down that route. Underneath we've got pickups to all 6 wheels, and there's a drive from the motor. I can see the outline of the gearing there to the frontmost axle, and then that drives back the other 2 axles via the connecting rods. The connecting rods themselves are quite beefy, finished in the same black that the rest of the chassis is finished in. We've got some quite subtle joggling there in the rods. What do I mean by joggling? Well, it's this bend where it bends down and back very, very quickly, and this is often a feature of connecting rods for various reasons, and that is replicated well. We've also got the knuckle in the centre. These rods look like they're jointed. I think that's purely cosmetic. The prototype had joints, so effectively they had a rod and then another rod, and the same on the other side, but this does look, when I'm looking at it, like we've got one solid rod, and that's quite understandable for a model. There's some sandpipes here from sandboxes at the back underneath the cab. These are actually moulded in quite a slender yet very flexible plastic, so even if you catch that, that doesn't look like it's at any risk of breaking. We've got another sandbox and sandpipe at the front, again the same. Quite flexible material which prevents damage. And then we've got brake blocks. It's very pleasing to see. These are factory fitted, and right up to the wheel tread. This is something that sometimes you see really quite awful gaps, and we don't get that here. They're fitted to be quite snug to the wheels, as the prototypes would be. Moving further up, you can see we've got these tanks for the braking system and number of valves. These locomotives featured air locomotive brakes. That's to say that the locomotive itself used air brakes to stop itself, but then it also featured vacuum train brakes, and this was in part so when it formed up as part of the consist of an engineering train being towed dead in transit, its brakes would be able to transmit through, so it wouldn't be a block in the continuous vacuum brake of the train. You can see on the front that we've got the vacuum hoses fitted from the factory as standard, and we've also got these metal steps. They're really quite large steps at the back. These feel like they're metal, brass of some kind, and they're quite firmly attached. Sometimes I always worry that the steps can be easily broken free with handling, but these do feel quite substantial, and that is good to see. At the front we've got these cutouts with the steps, just these cutaway holes at the back, and I suspect that this was more about providing a safe space for somebody like a banksman to be able to stand whilst the locomotive trundled along, and they would stand in there reasonably well protected with this capstan to hold onto, and the recesses at the back allowed them to climb up should the need arise. What is quite subtle in this livery too is that we've got the black painted underside, but then the edge is painted blue, and then the running plate on top is black again. There's really crisp demarcation between these similar but distinctive colours, and it really does make this livery stand out, as does the white walled tyres on the wheels. I really like this look. It makes for a very smart livery in this BR Rail Blue, and also hides the demarcation between the black inners with the correct spokes and counterweights from the chemically blackened wheel treads. Turning to the front face of the locomotive, this is captured quite well. One of the things that really made these stand apart are these quite large cab windows. It was very important with the kind of work that these were undertaking that good visibility was provided to the crew, and that's exactly what Ruston Hornsby made these cabs like. The buffers are not sprung, but we do get a crisp demarcation between the yellow and the black, and they feel quite robust, albeit not too chunky, and I suspect that those are metal pieces, but it's quite difficult to tell, but certainly they act like they're metal and do feel quite resilient. I'm not the biggest of fans of sprung buffers. It doesn't really bother me that they're not sprung. The coupling hook is missing in the centre. The hole where it would mount is picked out in black, which does look quite nice, but we get that dummy 3-link in the packet that comes with this. But in a way it's a shame that the bare hook isn't in there. I do think that does improve the look of any model. Moving further up, the lights on the front, we've got 2 at the bottom and then 1 almost like a spotlight on a bracket at the top. It's a shame in a way that these are fully non-functional items, but the lenses are picked out in a kind of gunmetal silver, which does actually look quite smart. The radiator looks to be separately fitted louvres. I suspect that that is an etched brass piece that's fitted on there, but it really is a great effect, and you can imagine you can see right through into the void behind. We've then also got what looks to be a separately fitted Ruston Hornsby works plate. That is a really nice piece of detail. You can just see it there, and the shadow it casts, it sticks out, and it really does improve the look of the front of these locomotives. The wasp stripes are really crisp, and I have to say that's one of the crispest set of wasp stripes I've seen on a model. Sometimes you get a sort of fuzziness between the yellow and black, but certainly on the front face there's not a hint of that. At the sides though, there is a tiny bleed through of the yellow where the wasp stripes butt up against the rail blue. It's not a huge amount, you can possibly just make it out there at the top, but it's not really a deal breaker for me. Certainly you're seeing that on your screen a lot bigger than it is in real life. I do like the electrical conduit picked out in orange on the front. Again, a really lovely detail touch that makes everything stand out. And then we've got handrails, which these on the front, they feel like metal. That feels like metal. That I'm not 100% sure on. It seems to have a lot more spring. It could be very thin metal. I suspect it could be. But then these at the top, these are a springy plastic. And they are quite robust. I did worry that these might shatter and break, as I know the Bachmann Class 04 shunter from 20 odd years ago was very, very prone to that. With a little bit of handling, these would break up something rotten on those. But this does feel like it will take punishment in its stride. We then also got the off-centre exhaust stack, a kind of very, very tight witch's hat. And this is picked out in a kind of almost a rust brown colour. I do quite like it. And the fact that it's not symmetrical really does add to the charm of this locomotive. The body side louvres appear to be all part of the moulding, but they are crisp and sharp. And I really do like this almost dinky, tiny BR double arrow, crisp and sharp right there in the middle, again as per the prototype. Moving back towards the cab front is something that is the make or break on these locomotives. They have this very distinctive raked look to the cab, and this is replicated on this model. Number 650 didn't appear to have this and was much more upright, and it's one of the reasons I don't think that Model Rail are able to offer that. For a tooling up for a one-off locomotive in an already small complement of locomotives might have been a step too far, but this really is achieved well. The raked back cab front, and we've got quite subtle black picking out of the frame around the quite sizable windows, and then we've got windscreen wipers. These look to be picked out in an almost gunmetal grey. And yes, these are a very, very fine etched metal part. And they are really well done. And as you just see in me giving them a good prod there, they are well attached, so there's no risk of them breaking off or coming a cropper. There's some quite subtle rivet detail as well on this. It's something that isn't necessarily immediately apparent, but they do look to be scale-sized rivets. The Ruston and Hornsby works plate on the side, this is printed on the side of the cab, but again, really quite crisp and sharp. And the PWM 652 above it, again, there's no fuzziness or smudging on the application of that lettering. The cab door looks to be quite narrow. I think that if you were a rather more portly person, it might have been a little bit difficult to get in and out of these locomotives. I think the Class 05 shunters were even worse. Then we've got these clear glazing which give a good view of this rather spacious cab interior. And there's very little to no prismatic effect around the sides of these, and they are completely flush to the model. We've got more of these windscreen wipers on the back. Again, an etched metal piece, really, really quite slender, but not flimsy in the slightest. Then we've also got, sadly, non-working lights, top and bottom as a pair. I like this orange electrical conduit. It is a separately fitted part. If I can get my tweezers there, I think I can actually just very carefully put that all the way underneath. Again, it really does look good with this selective separately applied parts. And then we've got these metal picked out in yellow lamp irons, really quite robust. That lamp at the top, even though it's not working, you can see there it's a separately fitted metal part, and it sticks out quite a way from the cab. The wasp stripes too, again, really sharp on this end of the locomotive as well. And then looking down to the buffer beam, not sprung buffers. We've got the vacuum hose, factory fitted. There is some rivet and plate detail on there. And then we've got, I think this is a re-railing bar. Certainly, I know from watching Javanese sugarcane railways, they have this kind of a bar. And if the locomotive comes off, it's what they jack it up to get it back on the track from. It does feel a little bit loose at one end, and I suspect that the glue that holds that in may have just broken away. Just something to watch out about. Returning to the running plate, I just want to show you we've got these lifting eyes. Again, another distinctive feature of these locomotives, and it's not completely symmetrical because we've also got this mechanical lubricator on the side as well, with quite a complex multi-joint linkage that goes up to it, so that when the wheels go round, the mechanical lubricator moves too. And that's a method quite similar to what Heljan used successfully on the Class 07 diesel. Looking to the top of the bonnets, we've got the panels picked out as you would expect, as per the prototype. And then onto the cab roof, we've got dual horns here. front and rear facing. Again, very important when you're working on quite an intensive work site, usually in an overnight possession. And then we've got these almost slightly triangular rain strips on the roof, and the roof itself is finished in this rather nice satin black. The rail blue for me is about the right shade. I think that is quite perfect. I've seen a lot of variants in rail blue on models. It must be said, not all rail blue was the same rail blue. It did vary for a variety of reasons, including sun fading, trips through carriage washers and such like. But this is a particularly nice rendition. One of the things which I've seen a lot of people talk about online is the fit between the engine body and the running plate. Quite a few people had claimed that there was like a panel gap, it didn't fit right and needed a lot of work and fettling. All I can say is that out of the box you can see there that the panel fit on this model, it really is absolutely perfect. This is how I received it, and certainly what I see here does look really good. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
Running on DC, the model performs really well straight out of the box. Put it straight onto my rolling road and it just fired up and romped away really quite well. It's very apparent that this locomotive is really low geared, so it won't do a huge rate of knots, but it does seem to have an awful lot of low down torque whilst it's doing it. The cab light is actually quite bright, but bear with me a moment on this. I think personally I prefer bright cab lights. The reason for this is, well, actually the main purpose really is in being able to enjoy the detail that's there in the cab, and this locomotive really does have a lot going on in there with a lot of separately decorated parts and fittings, and it would seem a shame otherwise to not be able to properly see that, so I'm quite okay with it. On DC, if you don't want it on, just wave a magnet over the top of the roof, either the supplied wand or in fact any other magnetic device will just do the job for you, and it just turns that light straight off. I noticed that the light did feel like it was at a fairly constant brightness regardless of the speed of the locomotive. Again, another great feature which stops it from being distractingly dim at low speeds, building up to a brightness at a fast speed. So we come now to DCC Fitting, and I'm going to be using a Train-O-Matic Next 18 decoder. These are available from tramfabriek.co.uk. The link to them is in the description box down below. I've got a few tools ready. I've got my trusty tweezers, I've got a jeweler's Phillips style screw head, and also just in case I've got a very, very tiny flathead jeweler's screwdriver, just in case we need to lever anything clear. So it appears that what we need to do is remove these detail boxes that are just here at the front. It says remove the two parts as the arrow directs, so it looks like we just need to push this out. Yeah, and I can see it freeing off. It looks to be just a plug-in fit. I'm going to do the same there. They actually come out reasonably well. They're not glued in, they appear to be just a push fit. There's like a very slight sort of stickiness on some of the pins. It's not glue as such, more like Deluxe Materials tacky wax, I think would be the best way of describing it. That then exposes these two screws down here. Now, being very careful how we squeeze the model to get a grip. We don't want to dislodge any of the detail parts. Just going to undo one. I'm going to undo two. These appear to be the only two screws that we need to undo. I'm going to use my tweezers just to get them out. And then we're looking at removing the clips, and you can just see we've got clips there at the back, plus clip, 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 and clip. I'm going to try and use the flathead screwdriver and just gently push these free. That was very difficult. It did feel at times like I was on the verge of actually breaking the model. In fact, I did get one detail part come off, the little wheel from the lubricator, so I'm going to have to reattach that. So I have got the body off. What I can say is that the running plate actually isn't metal. I thought it felt like it was metal, but that is a plastic piece, and it became apparent when trying to get the body off because it was flexing. Getting these tabs to release is very, very difficult, and I cannot stress that enough. These two at the back proved particularly troublesome. We do have a speaker enclosure, no speaker pre-fitted, but it does recommend if you fit sound to this that you utilize that speaker enclosure to ensure that everything fits. Looking across here, we've got some contacts for the cab lighting, just sprung-loaded phosphor bronze. There is actually quite a lot of space inside the model, and you can also see the separate controls just in there in the cab. And I really do like a lot of the separate parts you can see here, the handbrake handle and such like. This is the Next 18 decoder socket. I'm just going to lever that off, and I'm going to take the Trainomatic Next 18 and very, very carefully just clip that back into place. I can see here as well that we've got what appear to be some extra wires. I think these are for the speaker, so if you are using a speaker of your own variety in here, then it does look like we've got these fly leads to attach to your decoder, and it's not clear whether it also has a connection through the Next 18 decoder socket. What I will say as well is that underneath the board you can see we've got the motor in there. There is a very heavy die-cast chassis, and it really is quite straightforward to remove this to gain access if you need to do any maintenance. Very small motor, brass flywheel, and then a flexible shaft to the gear tower within this quite heavy duty casting for the chassis block. What I am going to do is test this before I reassemble it, because getting that body off really was tricky. And if there's one thing that I could suggest to Heljan, just, don't knock screws. Screws are your friend. They're easy to undo, they give positive location, and the end user can use them to readily get in and out of the model. But there we are. So I tested it on the programming track. Everything works as I expected, so I now feel safe to put the body back on. Now this should just slide back into place. So just going to make sure we're not getting any detail or wires trapped, and then hopefully a nice firm push should just relocate all of those clips, and that does feel like it's gone back into place. No, not at the front though. So just very carefully squeezing down. Yeah, just need a nice firm squeeze and firm squeeze. I can see that detail part is going to need a little bit of glue. And on this side, it does look like everything has gone and seated back home. So now it's just simply a case of getting the screws back in, and then we can move on to the main layout for testing. When it comes to running on the track, the model actually performed much better than I was expecting, given its small size and short wheelbase. On the torture test track, it got all the way round, took in the twists and turns and even down to radius 1 curves with no issues whatsoever. I got it going over both Insulfrog and Electrofrog points without any great issue. At very, very slow speeds, it did seem just a little bit stuttery, and it struck me that this is a locomotive that would benefit from at least a small stay alive. It was able to pull what is actually quite a reasonable length train for the 5% gradient. Not many locomotives seem capable of taking that, particularly through the twisted radius 1 curve on that gradient, and it handled this, albeit small load, really well. When it came to running on the main line, it was a very different story, but in a very good, positive way. I actually, on a whim, put it in charge of a very long coal train, not actually expecting it to be able to pull this all the way round, but pull it did, with no real sign of wheel slip, and it got it around and round the layout with a greatest of ease. There was only a few places where, when running with the cab light on, you could see that flicker just a little bit, but these are areas of Weir Yard that a lot of locomotives tend to have a few gremlins with. So all in all, this was a really quite pleasing performance from this small locomotive, taking on lengths of trains that the real prototypes would probably never ever be tasked with. There's plenty of performance here, and really it did run pretty well. So we turn now to the scores, and first up is build quality. Overall, I thought that this was a pretty well put together model. There's lots of separately fitted parts, and these do seem to, with just a couple of exceptions, stay put with the handling. The handrails on the bonnet sides and the cab sides are pretty robust, with some very thoughtful choices of materials. The only exceptions to this were when coming to the DCC fit, and it has to be said that an extraordinary amount of force was required to get the body to release from the chassis. During this process, there were a couple of casualties, including the bars at the very bottom of the buffer beam at one end, as well as the small hand wheel on the mechanical lubricator, and one of the mounting points of the top bonnet handrail. All had to be glued back into position, but I put this down in part to the force required just to get in there for the DCC fit, but more about that later. The horns on the roof were quite robust, as was the really quite slender witch's hat exhaust bonnet, and the lights, whilst not functional, were actually pretty robust and didn't seem to cause any issues whatsoever. So all in all, I'm going to give this a 9.0. On running quality, the model did perform really quite well. I must admit that I thought it might have a few issues because of that really short wheelbase and its small size, which does kind of limit how much weight you can realistically get into a model like this. But it did punch well above its weight. On the torture test track, it got all the way round, including through the twists, the turns, radius 1 curves, insulfrog and electrofrog points, although I did find that if you ran it too slowly, it did have a little bit of a habit to stall in random places. There doesn't seem to be a lot of vertical movement in any of the wheels, and this can mean that over twisty track it starts to lose contact on some of these wheels, and that did handicap it just a little bit. It does feel like this is a model that would benefit from at least a small stay alive, although there is plenty of room under the bonnet for you to be able to fit this should you so choose, and that is a route that I would recommend for DCC users. It did manage to pull 3 rather heavy Bachmann wagons on the torture test track, including over some tight curves on 5% gradients, which is actually, it must be said, better than a number of other locomotives have managed. So whilst it doesn't seem like a particularly long train, it is quite a strong test of any locomotive, and there was no sign of wheel spin, which indicated that this locomotive probably could have handled a wagon or 2 more. When it came to running on the main line, I put it in charge of a long rake of coal wagons that I had to hand already on the tracks. I must confess that I didn't actually expect it to be able to pull it all the way round, but it did just that. It romped away with what is probably a far longer load than the real ones would ever be tasked with, and it took it round and round Weir Yard without any issues whatsoever. There were a few places on some of the more troublesome crossings where I could see the cab light was flickering just a bit, and that takes us back to needing the small stay alive. But overall, I thought the performance was pretty reasonable, and I'm going to give it an 8.6. When it comes to DCC fitting and innovation, well, let's start off with innovation. I thought that there's a lot of good features on this. The mechanical lubricator, for a start, is something that Heljan did really well on the Class 07 models, and it has carried across to this. The inside of the cab too is nicely well detailed, and while some people may find the bright cab light is not to their tastes, I find that if you're going to have a really nice detailed cab, it's best to be able to show that off, and you can always turn down the brightness in the CV settings on the decoder. Although DC users might find that if it's too bright for them, just turn it off. The magnetic wand is a great feature, and it's nice to see that this is being used on more and more locomotives. The rest of the detail is really good, and I thought that for a really small class of quite obscure locomotives, it's really nice to see that Model Rail and Heljan have taken this on and taken it on really well. But then we get to the DCC fitting itself, and I have to say that this felt to be unnecessarily difficult. The body itself is held on by 6 clips and 2 screws, and when I was really fighting it to get that body off, I found that a few of the detail parts became victims to the amount of force that was required. I did get the body off in the end without causing too much calamity, but it just felt like it had been put on without too much thought for how anybody was going to DCC fit it in the end. Under the bonnet, the Next 18 socket allows for a really quite quick and simple DCC fit, and whilst there is an enclosure for a speaker, there is no speaker pre-fitted within it, and this is something that you would need to source. But the amount of space available really is quite generous, which gives plenty of room not just for a sound installation, but for a small stay alive as well. Getting the body back on was equally quite tricky, and I had to really push and shove that bonnet down and then manipulate the tabs with a small screwdriver to get them to click back into place. I've seen it said online that it's very difficult to seat the body correctly, but I must admit that I didn't have any difficulty with this as long as you take the bull by the horns and really push down whilst flicking the little clips to one side with the flat blade of a screwdriver. But it really just feels like 2 extra screws could have done away with all of those clips, and that would have been a much better option. So I'm going to give this a 5.1. On accuracy and quality of finish, it is really quite mesmerising to see how much of the detail has made it into this model. They've captured the look and feel of the 4 members of this class, although the tooling, it has to be said, quite reasonably so, is not suitable for producing number 650, which had a lot of very fundamental detail differences, including the different shaped cab and smaller wheel diameter, so it is very understandable that that is not included. 3 members of this 5-strong class have been preserved, so this is something which will be quite useful not just for Western region modelers, but also those wishing to model the preservation scene, and a pair of them have survived at the Heritage Shunters Trust at Rowsley, and it's great to see them cared for to such a great degree. I really do like the front grille of the locomotive. This was a particular highlight for me, and even the electrical conduit in its orange I thought was really well done. There's a lot of detail in the cab, and overall I thought that this was a really strong area for the model, and I'm going to give it a 9.2. On value for money, the model retails for £169, but wait, that's the price you pay if you're not a Model Rail subscriber. If you are a subscriber, there is a discount to that price, and it must be said that quite often when they have been for sale at shows via the Kerno Model Rail Centre stand, they have had some really good deals, and for something that's so unique, I have to say that you would normally expect a price premium for such an unusual model with such a low number of class members that didn't really carry a huge number of different liveries throughout their lifetime. All 4 members that are modelled are represented in those available. All liveries carried by the prototype are represented in model form, and Model Rail and Heljan do have to be applauded for bringing what would otherwise be an obscure footnote to the Model Railway's ready-to-run range to the ready-to-run market in what is actually an affordable price for such a bespoke and well-detailed model. I'm going to give this a 9.0, and that gives us a final score of 40.9. It is a great and unusual model which will find a home on a great many layouts, be it in a small departmental yard or paired with any number of departmental liveried wagons that have been brought through either in the main range from retailers or from Model Rail themselves over the years. Finally, we've got the departmental shunter to match with those departmental wagons. So there you have it, a very unique model from Heljan and Model Rail. And I must admit that I never thought that we were going to see this particular prototype ready to run. I actually thought the Class 06 shunter might appear long before we'd get this. But Model Rail never shirks from commissioning interesting and niche models, and the 4 prototypes that they can produce from the tooling have all been quite amiably represented in model form, giving you all of the different liveries that these carried over the years. And we do have a link down below that you can go and check out for all different versions from BR Green right through to Engineers Yellow. I must admit that I came into the review with a little bit of trepidation. It's very easy to go on a certain internet forum and read comments about poorly fitting bonnets and stuff that won't clip into the running plate. And that was an area that I must be honest and say I was looking for from the outset, but I don't like to take other people's words on it, certainly not on internet forum sites, and I was pleasantly surprised when it arrived. The body fit together perfectly fine, and even after doing the DCC fit I was able to get the body back on and properly seated. And whilst it was a little bit challenging to do that DCC fit, if I can do it, anybody else can do it. Just be slow, methodical and careful, and the end result shows that, you know, it can be done. There's a lot of great features on this model, and it really does perform reasonably well on track. For DCC users, it would benefit from a small stay alive, but it's actually really easy to fit one. There is a good deal of space inside there, and even if you go down the sound fitted route, there is dedicated space for a speaker, and I believe that you could get a small stay alive in there as well that just tide it over on any slight stutters on the track. It is an incredibly short wheelbase, probably shorter than even some 040s, such is the close spacing of those wheels, and that is always going to hamper any locomotive running slowly on less than perfect track. But actually, overall, I thought it performed quite well. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about this model down below in the comments. Do leave a comment, it's always great to hear from you. Do you have one of these? What have been your real world experiences of it? Or is this something that you were really quite interested in getting for your layout? Do let me know, and also if I missed anything in the prototype history, then leave a comment down below. It's a good way of helping out your fellow model rail enthusiast with your knowledge. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself. Please like, share and subscribe, and until next time, you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, We have sought after models from all around the world, with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
We're proud to be supported by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for new and used. Pre-order all forthcoming models with confidence, or check out the extensive listings of second-hand. Each model is checked by experts in the field to make sure you're getting the very best. With new models uploaded daily, there's always something new to find. You can also specify from their value weathering and renumbering service right through to bespoke graffiti to get exactly the model that you want. Get something special today by browsing at themodelcentre.com. I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/JenniferKirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.